This is a video about the principles behind my layout Bulford. The layout itself is an end-to-end branch layout with some storage facilities on each end of the layout. The station prototype, the main station prototype, is Cressing, and it used to be called Bulford before World War I, and that's where the name Bulford comes from. When I first used the station myself, when I lived there, there was still only one gas light, and it was used by DMUs around about the 1975. Within a few months, catenary was up and overhead wires brought in, and in order to facilitate the longer EMUs, a longer and higher platform was installed, allowing for 8 coach trains to actually load and unload at Cressing. Now there were 12 coach trains going to London, so it was quite interesting that if you got on the wrong coach in those days and there were slam door coaches, you could find yourself on the track, and that happened to me once or twice. Later on, of course, when they did the overheads, they renewed all the utility supplies to the station, so electricity was laid on. And because this station actually sits on the top of a crest above the fields, it was quite strange when all the fluorescent lights first lit up. So influences, well, I discovered the old Great Eastern Railway branch from Braintree to Bishop Stortford when I moved out to Shalford in 1975. And I also discovered the lighter constructed railways such as the Thaxted and Kelvedon branches. And of course, once I started modelling myself, I discovered Wisbech as well, which has its own unique character. Modelling the post-war pre-nationalisation steam transition period up to early 60s green, but with some modelling license. I don't always stick to what should run together. Learning from years of exhibition operating practice with other people's layouts, I still wanted to enable some operating potential with the design, with the track plan. Bulford was in fact started in 1999, which is an awful long time ago now, but even back then I was anticipating that I would carry on working on it and that I would suffer from Asian infirmity, and in actual fact that was a good decision, because I actually had a big fall in 1997, which came back to haunt me later in life. My rule number 1 is to be able to run unprototypical period combinations of stock. Each loop and siding, though, is designed to support a tender locomotive and 2 suburban coaches. Hopefully not going to run into problems with length of sidings and loops. Bulford is a fictional compromise, but using prototype items, so I love to seek out Great Eastern buildings and even build at Great Eastern cameos, but it is overall a fictional compromise. I do have some very old stock, and even have some things in Great Eastern Railway livery still, and I'm trying to make sure they are heavily weathered to compensate appearing alongside items from the 1950s. The main aim is to create the right East Anglian country atmosphere and an imaginary painting in 3D. In other words, a train spotter's delight or a railway historian's dream. A situation where you could wander down the track and find an old Great Eastern wagon sitting at the end of a siding. So what's it going to be? Is it going to be a branch line or a light railway or a tramway? Which do we go for? And I really wanted to model mostly my local Bishop Stortford, Braintree and Malden, Essex lines. I did have a attempt at modelling Dunmow before I came to the United States, and I did actually have it all fully working, but with no scenery on it. Sadly, it did not survive. When I came to the United States, I destroyed it. I realise now I didn't need to do that, but at the time I thought I did. I was attracted to Elsenham and Thaxted and Kelvedon and Tolsbury, as well as Braintree, Bishop Stortford and Malden railways. And I got into Wisbech and Upwell too, because it had so many of its own unique Great Eastern idiosyncrasies. I actually then decided, well, you know what, I'm going to do both. I'm going to have two distinctly separate end-to-end branch lines on the layout, and I now call them the branch and the light railway sides, Great Bulford and Bulford Low Level. There is a cross-board link and return incorporated between them on the layout, so I can run onto and off them from one to the other and back again. And the layout design was then worked out using AnyRail software. And I printed out a small scale plan, and then on the basis of that got some photographic foam board and created a 3D mock-up using cotton wool for just as a rough idea of the vegetation. Really do recommend doing this. It was really helpful to be able to see a sub-miniature version of what I was trying to achieve. So this was the original design, and the original design was to bring everything down to board level, or have a separation between the branch and light railway fiddle yards on the left there on board number 1. And the original idea was to have board number 1, which was about 4 feet long, to come down to board level for number 2, so that number 2 could be almost anything. You could put another board of any type in there because the connections between the boards were so simple. It's not what I ended up doing in the end, but I only constructed boards 1, 3, 4, and 5 in the end, because that road down the middle ended up ending on to board level halfway through board number 2. But I still maintain the 2 separate fiddle yards, and they had 3 identical sidings on each. The main branch is at the top on these plans, and the light railway is at the bottom. There are links in and out of the light railway, and there will be a halt somewhere on board number 3. There is a temporary storage arrangement at the other end of the layout, and a light railway terminus station is on board number 5 too, as well. So one of the aims for this was to create a showcase for my Great Eastern Railway collection, some buildings I already had, including Cressing Station building and signal box, and road vehicles too. So a road was allowed right down the middle of the layout. Bit controversial that, but it was to serve as a scenic break between the branch and the light railway, as well as an area where I could display my die-cast vehicles. Another bonus of the design was that it can be viewed from either side, and so it could reappear at a show displaying a completely different aspect to the public. The roads, arches, roads, builds and crossings, and as much foliage as I can incorporate, a lot of trees have been installed since this picture was taken, will act as viewing screens and framing for photography. It allows as many photographic viewpoints as possible on a comparatively small layout, which, by the way, is only about 16 feet long and about, I think it's 2 feet wide. The aim is to use the layout as a working diorama with both urban and rural settings for exhibiting, photographing and recording my growing collection of East Anglian rolling stock and vehicles. So another departure from tradition is to apply scenery to the fiddle yards. I'm going to use Pico cradles literally out in the open to turn the locos for now, and I don't mind doing that at all. At the main fiddle yard, the road is raised on industrial arches, and as I explained earlier, I wasn't able to bring that road down to board level on one board. So, but each side is similar with yard lamps installed, which could be wired up to work if I wanted to do so, and they're accessed by 2 Electrofrog 3-way points. The reason for the Electrofrog 3-way points, by the way, is because I have a lot of 040 locomotives, or quite a few that I want to use. The light railway comes to a terminus at the other end of the layout, as you can see below here on the left. And above the light railway terminus, the tracks end on 3 similar storage sidings in what I would think would be an industrial area up on that right hand side there. The branch passes through a station to those exchange sidings, I call them, and the area there below where you see the rails laid into a road, that will be a combination of town and industrial area. At the moment, that is laid to the corner of the board and not expected to go any further. So here's the raised area and the 2 Electrofrog 3-way points and the yard lamps you can see there too. A little roadway underneath the bridge there, which is quite interesting little thing to do. The road itself, as you can see, raised way ahead so that it separates viewing from each side. As you go further down towards the other end of the layout, you can see at the end of Cressing station platform here, or sorry, Great Bulford station platform there, my original construction of Cressing signal box, which was scratch built. A small crossing. It's a bit smaller than I had intended. More on that later. And then the road goes off and down and around into the small town on the top right hand corner of that board. I use code 100 Electrofrog where possible. There's 1 or 2 other points in there because I'm in the States and they're not always easy to get. But most of the track work is Pico Electrofrog. The underlay is 1/8" chamfered cork strips, but I do make sure I glue those down with cork adhesive, not with PVA or any other glues. The ballast is a finer N gauge grey and brown balance. We have different colours for variety, and I still do experiment with water-based wallpaper paste powder to fix the track, mixing the granite ballast with some wallpaper paste powder, old-fashioned stuff which I brought back from England a few years ago, the idea being that I can remove and move around the track if I decide to do so. Doesn't work as well as I'd like, but it does work up to a point. To stop it moving through accidental spillages, I do spray the track with I put track color enamel paint here. I think I'm using different colors as well now to try and make it look a little bit better. Sealing it against accidental spillages, and it really does work for that. You just get if you spill some Coke on there or something, it just sits there as a globule and you can wipe it away without too much damage. So yes, this wallpaper paste powder actually does work, but it does dry rock hard, and it's much more stubborn to wash away to rescue track than I expected. My old layout demo, I tried to rescue track, not knowing if I could afford to buy any over here, and I didn't rescue as much as I would have liked to. Pretty difficult sometimes, but I still experiment with it. Rural became urban. Yeah, this layout originally was supposed to be all rural, all green. The idea being that instead of having this road raised on arches, it was going to be an embankment with trees and shrubs and so forth. But I found the baseboard that I'm using is simply not wide enough to have that. If you do a 3-foot wide baseboard, then you can do it, but 2 feet is pushing it too much, and so I decided to have an industrial end to the layout. It's proved to be pretty useful for photographing rolling stock actually, and was finished quite early on, although I will say I cut so much card for that I got a repetitive strain injury on my hands from it. The fiddle yards do need it. I decided the fiddle yards had to be completely hidden from each other. That's why the raised road was extended onto the second board, or board 3 in fact. I did buy some long crossing gates, some really nice Great Eastern Railway 3D printed long crossing gates, but unfortunately again I didn't really leave enough room to use them at the moment. I'm still looking into that, but bit of a challenge. Some red brick scale scenes arches were added to the Metcalfe ones. The Metcalfe ones became rather expensive for the length I wanted, and it gave a bit of variety too. And then the final effect, as I said, was more urban than I envisaged at the Fiddleyard end, but it's been quite nice as a backdrop. And not only that, I have got really enthusiastic about Port of London Authority models which suddenly came out, and I have quite a large fleet of Port of London Authority London Docks models which suit that diorama much better than a country one would. So these are the baseboards, and you can see the baseboard was built with a 1/4 inch marine plywood for the board tops in the days when it was economical to buy that stuff. It's pretty expensive now. I still hate screwing and nailing into it, and it is a bit of a problem only being a 1/4 inch sometimes with what what you're trying to do on the top and underneath. I have a pair of two that should be not 2 foot by 1 foot, it should be 2 inches by 1 inch legs fold up along the bottom edge of the frame. That worked pretty well. And the boards are now an awful lot lighter to handle than the chunky 3/4 inch chipboard boards with 2 by 2 legs that I had for Dunmo, and it's just as well because I can't move stuff like that anymore. I did not use an open baseboard design. I wanted to keep it simple. Those of you who are more skilled than I am might want to do an open baseboard design for something like this, but I decided to keep it as simple as I could. Back in the 70s, I started using Artex ceiling compound instead of plaster of Paris, again to keep the weight down on baseboards, but of course we now know Artex has got asbestos in it, and I don't even think it's available today. So I have not found a lighter equivalent, and plaster of Paris for model making was easily obtained locally. I don't have a lot of hills and dales on this layout, so I have just used plaster of Paris. So point and signal control. Each fiddle yard has an Electrofrog 3-way point, and they will be using, not wired yet, but they will be using 2 cell switching seat motors on each turnout. The rest of the points will be controlled by my good friend Bill Hannaford's lovely lever frames. He's a tool maker, and he created these for an exhibition layout we had many years ago, and I still have some, and I plan to use them. Bill's system uses Dacron fishing line, which is really good, doesn't stretch that much, and the tension is controlled by using 3-hole square plastic card, 3 holes drilled in a piece of plastic card, a bit like using tent guy rope sliders. The Dacron is connected to a spring return mechanism under each tie bar of the Pico points, and I do tend to take out the springs and the points. The baseboard joints are crossed simply with linked paper clips. I got to be honest, I didn't believe that would work until we tried it, and it did, especially when you have the guy rope sliders on either side, so you can tension it when you set the layout up or change it during the course of an exhibition. So this is a lever frame Bill made, and it's beautifully made, very, very durable. And I don't know if I've shown it very well, but underneath there are nylon tubes underneath that provides the bearing surface for the levers, and the levers are sprung across into those little slots at the top and bottom. This is the C Dacron fishing line. I know 0 about fishing, but this particular kind of fishing line does not stretch very much, and is very ideal for what we're using it for. This is the spring return mechanism that goes under the Pico point. Again, very simple but nicely done. I believe Bill used welding rod for the rods in this. And then later on, just at the end when we were using our exhibition layout, Ratio bought out some signals with spring returns on. Interestingly, I actually used, it seemed to use a lot of the content of instructions that I'd written about it, but I installed some LEDs in these signals too, so that we have a lamp in those. So I hope to do the same on this layout. Notice the yellow LEDs, by the way. There's a tendency nowadays for people to use the white LEDs, and back in the day, white light was very scarce indeed. It was always a creamy yellow kind of light that came from oil lamps or gas lamps, or you didn't get the pure white that you do today. The layout is analog. I am not using DCC, so it has a lot of isolating sections, especially in the fiddle yards, which have nine isolating sections in each fiddle yard. I will be using the same technique for this as I did for Dunmo, which is to have a cab control system using dual throw switches. And I do not have a panel yet, but this presentation is really talking mostly about the principles of the layout rather than the detail of finishing it. And I have two gauge master controllers and a suitable power supply to work them as well now over here in the USA. So the baseboard joints use multi-pin plugs and sockets, which are freely available here in States and England too. Control cords are, as I mentioned, linked by a pair of paper clips for the between the baseboard joints for the actual lever frames. All wires are not just connected to the multi-pin plugs and sockets, though they are connected to chocolate box terminals either side for easy maintenance in case anything gets broken. Not a very tidy picture, but you get some idea here of the pair of point motors underneath a three-way electrofrog point. Of course, you have to have the SEEP switched point motors for that. And you can see the chocolate box connections, and at the top you can see one of the interboard multi-pin connectors as well. So I was fortunate to pick up quite a few cheap woodland scenic tree kits over here. I don't go to the model shop very often, but I used to come back with several packets of them every time I went out. The plastic ones I find are far easier and better to use for an exhibition layout than the white metal ones, and I sprayed the trunks with dark earth and dusted with a lighter tan. Over here in the States I use Rust-Oleum camouflage colors for spraying. And I dry brush with a touch of light brown or grey to highlight the molded bark detail on them, which is quite nice to see. And then spray the branches with a tacky white glue spray from the local dollar store. I guess the pound stores will do much the same kind of stuff. And that tacky white glue spray was very useful. Added the foam foliage by twisting and turning the tree in a box full of foamed foliage, but mixing the colors up, getting several colors, mixing them up in a box, then turning the wet glue trees into the box full of foam. I finally at the end sprayed a color odorless, again, dollar store hairspray, and that worked really well. I sprayed that, sprinkled a bit of mixed lighter colored flock over the top just to give it some depth, give the tree some depth with a darker color underneath and a lighter on the surface of the tree foliage. Gives a bit of a modular kind of look of it. I've installed the trees and shrubs in the fiddle yard, and then I asked myself, should I have installed static grass first? Since I wrote this presentation, I've actually done the whole layout with trees and static grass. One thing I did discover about static grass is you must have a 12-volt static grass gun, not anything less. Did I say 12 volt? I actually probably meant 9 volt. 9 volt static grass. If you get 12 volts, even better. But what order should you do this stuff in? Well, actually, I'm thinking you do want to do the static grass first, really, which is what I have been doing. I have yet to add more shrubs, and I'm probably going to use more static grass, but I love the idea of having static grass nicely stable in between the rails in various places, because I do want that rural effect of this layout. So station construction, the branch line, the main, or it's basically the main line for my layout, but the branch line, the full branch line is Bulford. As I said, it's based upon Cressing. A fictional light railway terminus similar to Thaxted is called Bulford Low Level, and at the moment it has some adapted wheels stroke Pico building kits on it. There will be a tiny one-lamb halt on the board for the light railway passing loop, which is not done yet. But Bulford signal box and building was scratch built over 40 years ago, and I did have to, yeah, I did say that 40 years ago. I did actually end up having to recreate the valancing recently. So I did joke here that I must complain to Slaters that their stuff only lasted 40 years. Yeah, 10th plastic iron. A drawing of Cressing is now available from the Great Eastern Railway Society, and there is a 4mm scale Cressing building kit from Intentio. You will have to talk to them as to whether it's still available though, because I believe only the O gauge 7mm scale one is listed on their website last time I looked. There are some 3D printed canopy supports available from Charlie Connor, you know, they're pretty good to do. I actually use some old George Allen ones, of which I had quite a few. Charlie Connor is CDC Design. I'm sorry about the references to shapeways.com in this presentation. Of course, as you probably will know, shapeways.com is no longer around, but where possible, I have given the actual supplier's name for things that I've used. As I mentioned, the Bulford platform is made from ratio kits and wheels kits, and I did change them a bit, and I added some different items to the platform edges. The wall support discs, I think it's from, oh crumbs, I've forgotten the name of them, but I'll come to that in a minute. They were common sight on the Great Eastern Railway when I used to look at the platforms and everything. So I found some that were laser cut and used those. Fence stanchions were from shapeways.com, not available as far as I know now. Were very, very fine indeed. I had to drill out the holes with 0.5mm drills, and some of those stanchions got wasted because, of course, they're very brittle, big 3D printed. So I made sure I got plenty of spares though. I really can't find anything better than the old Merit gas lamps for what I wanted. It really is a crying need for something a little bit better. Most of the things I've seen that are nicely detailed are far too big, in my opinion. And a couple of these gas lamps at the top, I cut the lamp standards off and fixed them to plastruck rails. I think they look pretty good like that, and that's how they often were used. 3D printed station seats are available online, and they were in shapeways.com, but there is a supplier now online. Search for them, 4mm scale Great Eastern Railway seats. Some nice ones. There's some that are cheaper without the GER monogram, and some that are more expensive with the GER monogram in them. I also have some beautiful etched brass ones made by Camelway many years ago. As I think I mentioned, the low-level buildings are enhanced wheels and ratio kits. I probably wasn't very clear earlier on. The platform for the Bulford, the larger station, that is actually a ratio kit, and I found that quite a challenge to use, but I did manage to get it to work for me. The platform for Bulford low level is a little bit more complicated. We'll come to that in a minute. Lamps are 3D printed from Bachmann on the low level station, and at one point they weren't available. I think they may be available again now. And I did decide not to try and imitate Cressing's shed for the bicycles and just use the wheels one. I actually rather like that kit in the end. And you can see I've used some laser etched stanchions as well on the edge of the ratio platform there, just to give a bit more sense of the atmosphere. Some etched manhole covers, by the way, on the top of the platform too. Not overdone, just there's some there. And this is my ancient model of Cressing station building, which I haven't really changed too much. George Allen columns with a little bit of fiberglass on the bottom to change the bottom, the foot of those cast, beautifully detailed cast canopy supports, and then the etched brass above the angles supporting the canopy. And as I say, there are now 3D printed alternatives. So just a bit of a long view here of Cressing or Bulford. Bulford having, as you can see, it's a tight fit to the end of the ramp when the ramp comes down. This looks very different now actually, because a lot more vegetation than was shown on this, but I'm going to save that for another presentation later on to see the improvement that's been done. I don't remember the make of those kits for the vans, but they are fun to do and research as well. So we can see Williams and Griffin coming to the station there in their Pentechnicon, Horstrom Pentechnicon. You get an idea there. That area on the left-hand side, where the loop is, by the side of the ramp, that is where there will be a halt. And of course, as you realize, none of this makes any sense in reality, so it is going to be separated as far as possible with greenery and trees to screen off each station from the other, just to provide different areas for photography. And you can see too the line linking, the two lines linking the two branches, the light railway and the branch railway, together. The Airfix engine shed has already been replaced by a laser cut model, an L cut one, and has the square window version that I use, and it does fit beautifully. I was very surprised how well it fitted. So just a little locomotive sitting there next to the station building. You can see in the front of edge of the platform, the ratio platform, I've installed a little bit of a support for the end of a rod to reinforce the wall there. It's a laser cut detail that I got. The locomotive was purchased from the south of the United States, ready-made and done, but not painted. And whoever made it decided to make a particular locomotive with the shunter steps at the underneath the coal bunker there, as was done in Scotland. So it's all very much work in progress. Now this is the platform I mentioned for the low-level station. And as you can see, I had a real set idea that I wanted a sleeper-built platform here. And so I then come across something I've never seen before or since. Some Pico sleepers that were cut, they were very thin. And so I decided to get some of those to play with the idea of doing this short platform for the light railway. You can see here on the left the slight sleepers that I put on the ramp, and bringing them across to the front edge. I did study some photographs before I did this, of course, always a good thing to do. You can see there the finished article and the lamp, which I've actually used the I think it's a Bachmann lamp on the low level stations that I've used there. And one mounted actually on the carriage, on the grounded carriage body. Some lovely laser cut stuff around now, and I needed the steps to get onto the platform, and they seem to work quite well. So again, the finished version. You can see the seat, the Great Eastern Railway seat there too. So it's coming along, and this is the other building. I think I slightly changed some of these from the kits. So the halt isn't made, but it will look something like Stane Street, I think. And the townscape I mentioned, the townscape's right at the other end of the layout, where the track goes along, is set into the road using some DAS clay and I can't get it now, but a item that I got on Shapeways, which was to actually it's a wheel that impresses the design of the cobbles into the DAS, and I did that. I can't say I'm entirely happy with that. It's a bit of there's no substitute for doing it the hard way, I think. A friend of mine, Charlie Petruzzo, insists that I must have pigeons on this layout. So not only will I have these vastly underscale HO scale pigeons, but I will also have a vastly overscale 172 scale World War I B-type bus loft, and that will make a cameo down by the ramp where the road comes down to the baseboard. And it's going to be a bit of fun. Now I actually did manage to pick up, I bet it's not $20 now, but I picked up some strip LED, the lights for flipboards for presentations at industry, office presentations for industry, and a supplier was selling a load of these off at $20 each, and I managed to pick up some for the layout, hoping to be able to make use of those to light the layout using their crocodile clips. And this presentation was developed originally, and a discussion came about the back scenes, and I have actually got some ID back scenes, photographic back scenes. Not sure about the self-adhesive idea, but they do come self-adhesive. But what I did discover when I was looking at these things was they got far too much of the wrong period items on. They have things like direct glazing and satellite dishes and larger glass window panes, which were simply not common in the period I really want to cover up to the early 1960s. Once again, you've got to watch the color. You didn't see pure white in that time either. Again, even the crown gloss paint we used to use back then was a creamy color, oily color. So I've got to do some work on those, but the idea is as well that those back scenes will fix to either edge, that I can use them as back scene to change them over to the other side and see almost like a completely different layout. And these are the links to get them. And they do look lovely on layouts, at least I hope they will when I get it done. So once again, this is Bulford, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can reach me on Stephen_Duhig, D-U-H-I-G, Stephen with a V, _Duhig, D-U-H-I-G, at yahoo.com. Stephen_Duhig at yahoo.com. Thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Bye-bye.